Hello and welcome to another video. I'm Mads and today I'm in Gloucester. And in today's video I'll be trying out this Audi A7 Sportback. A huge thank you to Jay for lending me his car, and if you are an Audi owner and you would like a car featured on the channel, feel free to reach out. A quick overview: the Audi A7 is Audi's executive coupe slash saloon slash liftback hatchback. Basically their equivalent to the Mercedes-Benz CLS and BMW 6 Series Grand Coupe. Now the Sportback concept came out back in 2009, and the production car, the A7, a year later. And I must say, styling wise, it has stood the test of time very well. It still looks very modern, it still looks very distinctively Audi, whilst still looking more stylish over the A6 on which it's based, specifically the C7. Now this first generation car ran from 2010 to 2018. This particular one is a pre-facelift, and the facelift came out around 2014 or 2015. The range starts with the entry-level 3-litre V6 with front-wheel drive, but most A7s are all-wheel drive, specifically Audi's Quattro system. And then you've got the S7, and then at the very top, the RS7, which is the closest you can get to an RS6 saloon, because with the C7, the RS6 was Avant only. This particular car is a 3-litre V6 diesel. This particular one has a stage 1 map on it, but this review I'm not really fussed about the car's performance. For any performance related concerns, that should be reserved for the S7 and RS7. Otherwise, here are the specs for this particular car. This car was available in various trim levels as well. There's the entry-level SE, followed by the Sport, followed by the S-Line, and then at the very top, the S-Line Black Edition, which this one is. And yes, above that are the S7 and RS7, but those two deserve their own separate reviews. There was also a long wheelbase version called the A7L, but that was sold only in China. And then the second generation A7 came out in 2018 and was in production all the way up until 2025. And if you are a second generation A7, S7 or RS7 owner and you would like a car featured on the channel, feel free to reach out. And there was going to be another A7, but that was reverted to be called the A6. So during the making of this video, there is no A7 in production. Now I've mentioned that this is an A7 Sportback, however there are no other alternatives made. Unlike the smaller A5, which was available as a coupe, cabriolet or Sportback, this A7 is Sportback only. So you cannot get the A7 with 2 doors, unlike its BMW 6 Series rival. So here is the front of the Audi A7, and here is the key fob. Now it is not the generic Volkswagen Group switchblade that they used to make just before this car was introduced, but interestingly this key fob was also used on Lamborghinis of this time, which is odd considering Porsche, who are part of the group, get to have their own distinct design. Otherwise, here is what the front of the car looks like. This is a pre-facelift example, so it has the pre-facelift headlights. These are xenon lights. The main headlight is xenon, but you do have an LED strip here, which Audi have somewhat started this trend with. They weren't the first company to have DRLs, that title goes to Volvo, but I would say Audi have popularized it. And of course, DRLs is something we see on every single manufacturer these days. This one doesn't have any front fog lights, so they are blanked out with this plastic trim here. Being a black edition, you get black slats on the grille, though strangely the negative space is still uncolored. If this were to be a Mercedes, this would be gloss black, and then this would be chrome. Being a Quattro all-wheel drive model, you've got the Quattro emblem here. If this were to be front-wheel drive, you'd get the trim instead, so S-line. And of course the signature 4 rings. Interestingly, these 4 rings were not originally made for Audi, but rather for their predecessor company, Auto Union. And Audi is basically represented on one of these 4 rings. The other 3 rings represent Horst, DKW and Wanderer. Once again, those were the 4 Auto Union brands. And yes, those other companies used these 4 rings as well. You get a very flat looking bonnet. Some of its rivals came with bonnet bulges, but none here. Coming around, those red brake calipers are aftermarket. Otherwise, this particular car has 21-inch 5-spoke rotor wheels, which also made their way to various RS cars. Though I do think on a black edition, black centres with polished outer edge would have suited the overall aesthetic better. The mirrors are currently folded in, and here's the overall side profile. Once again, it is a lot more stylish than the A6 on which it's based, and all A7s are Sportback, which means they all have back doors. You could call it a coupaloon, but unlike a saloon, this is a hatchback. And even though the quarter window is separate to the rear door, it's very common to have a plastic bezel here on where the window does not meet up. In this car, there is no plastic trim in the way. The advantage is it looks nice and uninterrupted. The disadvantage, they do not roll all the way down. Here's the rear wheel. Coming to the back. If I had to be a bit picky, is that I think the rear deck on this A7 could be a little bit higher. Otherwise, I do think it looks very good. The tints on the tail light are aftermarket, and the rear wing is currently in its cleaning mode. You've got chrome tips, one on each side. Now, some entry-level diesels on Audis will have both tips on the left if it were to be a diesel, specifically the 2 litres, as seen on the A5 and A6. But with the A7, the smallest you can go is 3 litre V6, so you get the 2 tips akimbo regardless. The S7 will have 4 exhausts, but then with the RS7 they go back to duals. Well, when I say duals, you look inside them and you get 2 smaller ones inside each tip. But then with the ABT, they go back to 4. Once again, 4 rings. This was before black badges were a thing, even on dechromed cars. Again, TDI for turbo diesel injection, and Quattro because it's got the all-wheel drive system, named after their Quattro rally car. Coming to the boot area, lifting up this very heavy hatchback. And one of the biggest advantages of a liftback tailgate is that the entire opening opens, which means you can fill up the boot easily. Here's how much space you get. The parcel shelf is very tiny, that's a bit of a disadvantage. Again, due to the sloping roofline and low rear deck, this part of the boot area is shallower than that side. This car does have folding rear seats, they are 60/40. This particular car has a rubber mat. And of course, if you need more space, just lift this up. But this particular car has a space saver spare wheel. Luckily, you do have tether points in this car, and storage nets on the side, extra hooks. And this is a German car, so somewhere in here should be the mandatory first aid kit and a warning triangle. Nope, not here. But I have a feeling the warning triangle is in here somewhere. And to close the tailgate, just press on that. This car also has a shark fin. And if you haven't already, check out the owner's Instagram. One thing I forgot to point out, this car has a sunroof, but a traditional one, so it's not panoramic like you get in a Mercedes. Coming to the back, and as you can see, even the back doors are frameless, and this does come to a disadvantage which I'll get back to later. Otherwise, here's what the door looks like. You get black piano sort of surrounds for the otherwise brushed aluminium finished door handle, or should that be door releaser. The grab handle doesn't have much padding, but then the door card itself does. That looks like it's going to be an ashtray on certain models. Correction, this is actually an ashtray. It is removable as well, but I'm sort of used to seeing ashtrays being metallic rather than plastic. You get electric rear windows, a very small door cubby, Bose sound system, S-line kick plates, and here's what the inside looks like. Unlike the CLS, its direct competitor, this car has 3 proper seats in the back. And the seat upholstery is very soft. Almost feels like Nappa leather to me. Sat in the back now, and I have very little amount of headroom, though it is fine for me, but 6-footers may struggle. That is the compromise of having an A7 instead of an A6. Otherwise, the 6-footers will definitely not complain of knee room and foot room. Even though the A7 is based on the A6, from where I'm sat, I feel like I'm sat in an A8. Otherwise, you've got seat back nets added on, though I would prefer seat back pockets. You've got a useful hook here for coats, but then another one here. Grab handles are damped. This S-Line Black Edition model has dark headlining, which is a compromise because it does feel very gloomy here, especially with these darkened tints. Once again, the upholstery does feel very nice, especially the seat centers with this somewhat quilting effect. Same on the seat backs, and even the headrests. You've got a center armrest here, which is very heavy. There we go. But no through loading. The armrest is a bit on the hard side. It could do with a bit more padding, but other than that, it is very big. And unlike some other cars, this does not have its cup holders taking space. Other than that, you do have some carpeted storage in here, and this empty section I would have assumed is for cup holders, but I'm guessing they're an optional extra that hasn't been fitted. Otherwise, this slit here looks like it should come out. This car does have Isofix anchor points, but they are removable ones, so there is a risk that you may lose them. And now I'm struggling to put them back in. There we go. But other than that, it does feel very nice in the back, despite the aforementioned compromise of having less headroom over the A6 on which it's based. This one does have rear climate controls and a 12-volt socket, and it's very unusual cutout here for what I can assume is only big enough for the key fob, like so. And personally, I do think this car could benefit with a panoramic sunroof, because all the lighting is only going to the front seats and the back feels dark. Otherwise, you do have 2 dome lights here. And the additional quarter window is letting in some light in the back. Only some. Coming to the business end now. Once again, these windows are frameless. And here's what the door card looks like. Again, you got some pebble texture on the door top, but this is not leather. You do have some padding on the center, and once again, the armrest is a bit firm as well. And once again, the door pocket is a bit on the small side, but they are still bigger than the back ones. That's there for you to open the tailgate from the inside. And once again, it has Bose speakers. And here's what the door handle once again looks like, with its black piano surrounding. And here's what the interior looks like. Strangely, on this S-Line Black Edition, you've got rubber pedals instead of metal ones. And here's what the seats look like. Coming inside, the interior is pretty much as identical to the A6 on which it's based. So here is my point of view. Once again, it is very similar to the A6 on which it's based, which is not a bad thing. After all, the CLS had a very similar interior to the E-Class of its time as well, but the 6 Series was a lot more distinct to its conservative 5 Series equivalent. But that being said, I do think it still looks very modern. I do like the texture of the steering wheel, especially with the 9-3 perforations. The design on this S-Line wheel does remind me of a Lamborghini Gallardo, and you do get analog dials on this first generation car, and the speedo goes up to a very optimistic 180 miles per hour. Again, being a diesel, the rev counter only goes up to 6,000 RPM, and I remember older BMWs had this as well. On the fuel gauge, rather than having E for empty, you get R for reserve. And definitely unlike a BMW, the pedal, the accelerator pedal, is tiny and upwards hanging, as opposed to being large and floor mounted. Many other car manufacturers have followed that suit as well. And Audi did eventually go to floor mounts on the R8, the second generation TT, and the e-tron GT. Now, unlike other cars from the VW group, to turn on your fog lights, you would pull on this dial once for the rear, and then twice for the front. But in this, it's a separate button. They even knurled the adjuster for your lights, which also has the same knurling as the mirror adjuster dial. Again, I mentioned this car has a Bose sound system, but I think on the A8 they use Bang & Olufsen, because with the Bang & Olufsen you get rising tweeters, which unfortunately isn't in this car. I'll get back to that later. And this particular car has black piano interior trims, and of course it is a Quattro model. Non-Quattros would just have the Audi rings here. Glove box is quite... well, it's horizontally big but vertically shallow, and the door is lined in felt. Here's what the passenger door looks like. And here's another look at the passenger seat. Once again, the Black Edition is based on the S-Line. You do get a nice center armrest. I don't think they made a manual A7, but the manual is available on the A6. And this is not a traditional torque converter. This uses an S-tronic gearbox, which is basically the Audi version of VW's DSG, or Direct Schaltgetriebe. Bizarrely, the start-stop button is on the passenger side, and this is not Audi cutting costs for right-hand drive. It's on the opposite side to the driver, whether it's left or right-hand drive. This here controls the Audi MMI system. Once again, I'll get back to that later. Behind the electronic parking brake is the hold assist button. And showing its age ever so slightly is this CD player. And a few blank switches. And once again, the knurling is continued onto these dials here, and this one as well. They also make a nice click when you turn them. Underneath that, you've got a secret storage cubby, currently with the keys in. And you do get 2 cup holders under this cover. Underneath the armrest is a passport. Underneath that is another storage cubby. Once again, this car uses some switch gears from other VW Group cars. Cruise control is controlled on this stalk here. Even though I'm in a fully loaded Black Edition, the steering wheel adjuster is manual. And for the DSG system, you do have plus and minus paddles. You can shift with the gear selector as well, but the plus and minus are the wrong way round. Again, I'll get back to that later. Also, the side repeater on the mirror housing extends onto the inside as well. So let's say if I'm indicating, you can sort of see the indicator flashing from the inside as well. Once again, the headlining is in black and the grab handles are dampened. You do get sun visors, and one thing I do like about this car, unlike Mercedes, is that the sun visor is also covered in this headlining material. You've got somewhere to store your notes. Here's your vanity mirror with an LED light inside. Here's your overhead console. So once again, dome lights. Not sure what this one does. Please tell me in the comments. And here is your sunroof controller. So you manually put the cover on like so. But to open, you pull on this tab here. And then the other way to close. Okay, turning on the ignition. And the center screen pops out. This unfortunately is showing its age a bit. This unfortunately is showing its age a bit. But press this button and the screen goes away. Let's bring it back out. Otherwise, right now it's in navigation mode, and you control it with this dial here with 4 shortcut buttons which control various corners of the screen. Personally, I do prefer this rather than the strict touchscreen that newer Audis have. And you also have other shortcut buttons here. So radio, media, nav, which we were in earlier, and telephony. Otherwise, press the menu button for the home screen, and you can just control through those aforementioned menus like so. Again, the dial does have a nice feel to it. I don't understand why they got rid of it on newer models. And with car, that's just basically your drive mode selector. So efficiency, comfort, auto, dynamic, and individual. And the A7 shown in the screen isn't an S-Line. It's either an SE or a Sport. Is there a CD in here? Yes, there is. I'm guessing this is for the sat-nav. And here are the dials with the screen in the middle. If I press these 2 buttons here, I can scroll through the tabs. Right now it's in phone mode. Here's Bluetooth, here's trip, and here is nav. And then if I press these buttons here, I can get out the menu for each of these screens. Like so. And with this here, I can sort of cycle through what I want shown on the info panel on the bottom. And on this side is basically shortcuts for the MMI. So sat nav, voice control, mute, volume, and the star button is basically your favorites. So this one, if I go into nav, basically alters between day and night mode for the navigation system. Now the touchpad is illuminated and numbers 1 to 6 are shown. And if I hover over each number, it showcases each radio preset. And just like any other VAG car, if I were to indicate left, the left DRLs turn on, and then if I were to indicate right, the right DRLs turn on. These are called parking lights. So if you're parked in a narrow street in Germany, let's say you're parked on the right hand side of the narrow street, if you do this, the lights closest to the road illuminate. So that's the exterior and interior done now. So let's see what this car is like to drive. So seatbelt on. B-pillar feels a lot more forwards in this car. Foot on the brake. Start the car. Even though I'm in a diesel, this car does have an aftermarket exhaust. So window down. Sounds very aggressive, and it does not sound like a diesel at all, in a very good way. So into drive, parking brake off, and off we go. Actually, let me move the seat a bit further back. There we go. From first impressions, just like a Mercedes, the steering in this car is very light. And from where I'm sat, just like a Jaguar, it sort of shrinks around you. I'm basically driving Audi's second largest car, second only to the A8. But from where I'm sat, it does not feel like a big car at all. Maneuverability feels very nimble for a car of its size as well. Green light. If I had to be a bit picky, is that the 9 and 3 sections of the steering wheel are very thin. That could just be me used to larger, thicker steering wheels. And just like a Mercedes, the 9 and 3 sections are somewhat squared off. But it's still got a round base, unlike the A5, which has a flat bottom. Rush hour here in Gloucester. This car has stop-start. Not sure how to turn it off, but otherwise, from first impressions, this car does cruise very well. The closest I've driven to this car is probably the Jaguar XF, which is technically more of an A6 and E-Class and 5 Series rival, but it's a lot more slopier in its roofline than all of those three. So you could argue it sort of straddles into the A6, CLS and 6 Series Grand Coupe category. Pickup in this car is very good as well. As I've mentioned, this does have the Audi Quattro system. Smaller Audis technically don't have Quattro. They have something called Haldex. But in this one, you've got the proper Quattro all-wheel drive system. Otherwise, the entry-level A7s have front-wheel drive. Even though this car has a very loud aftermarket exhaust, acoustically it's not coming in too much, which is fine by me. And that's me driving sort of everyday speeds, so 20 to 30. And the car doesn't even reach 2000 RPM. This is one of the perks of having a diesel. So the A7 was introduced in 2010. Around this time, if you wanted a diesel, if you wanted a petrol, you had to go for a full fat performance model, and the smaller petrols were basically non-existent. So if you wanted a small engine A7, you had to go for diesel. But diesel is still appropriate for some people, even in 2026, especially if you're doing lots of long motorway journeys. Roundabout. This car really picks up on those stop-start set-offs. And into Barton Street. Being an A7, this car will have lower stiffened suspension, and this also has the 21-inch rotor wheels, which usually compromise the ride. I am feeling some undulations on this road, and I am slowing down for them. But if you're used to sportier cars, this is a very comfortable experience overall. And the disadvantages are minor. I mean, yes, it is hard, but it's definitely not harsh. Again, if you do want a more comfortable experience, either go for a non-Black Edition and have slightly smaller wheels, or get very small wheels seen on the SE. But personally, I'm happy to make that compromise. So I just came from a very busy Eastern Avenue to a very empty Barton Street. The undulations are somewhat unsettling the ride a bit, but once again, I'm personally fine with it. It's not a deal breaker for me. And one of the disadvantages of having a twin clutch system as opposed to a traditional torque converter is that on stop-start, they can feel a bit jerky on movements, but I don't know, I think this one is doing okay. If I'm just letting go of the accelerator like so, I'm basically riding the clutch, even though this car doesn't have a clutch pedal. And that's one of the disadvantages of having a twin clutch system as opposed to a traditional torque converter. Okay, there's the jerk. So it's nothing to everything is when the car feels a bit jerky. But if you're in proper traffic, you're not going to notice the jerk. Here's another attempt. It's only when it properly sets off you get that movement. Yes, there is a slight lurch when setting off, but it's not instant, it's sort of a split second later. So if you're used to a traditional torque converter automatic, this may come as a bit of a shock to you. But if you're used to DSGs or S-Tronics or PDKs, this will be no surprise to you at all. And whilst the overall aesthetic of the interior does look very nice, if I had to be picky, is that whilst the seat leathers feel very nice, I do think they could have added some of that material onto the doors as well as on top of the dash. I know BMW do that with their 6 Series as well. There's the jerk. Yeah, so the jerk is not from complete standstill, it's only when you put your foot down while doing very slow maneuverability. Again, speed bumps are coming through, and it is definitely a sportier suspension. I'm personally happy with it, but it is something to look out for if you want a more luxurious experience. Setting off again, foot down, and there's a lurch. As I was saying, I'm personally happy with the way this car performs in stop-start traffic and speed bumps and undulations, but it is worth taking note that the S-Tronic gearbox is lurchier than your usual ZF 8-speed, and because this car is an S-Line, it has lower stiffened suspension over its standard SE counterpart. Someone's blocked a bus. But overall, this is not an issue for me, but it may be if you're looking for something more comfortable. Okay, leaving Barton Street now and into the city centre. Again, just like a Mercedes, this car has very light steering, which will definitely be beneficial when manoeuvring around parked cars, like so. But that does mean just the tiniest of twitch like that does make the car react. Very easy to do it with just one hand. And onto a red light. City maneuverability is perfectly doable in this car. Again, the twin clutch solution does make it a bit two-stage when setting off, but other than that, nothing much to report. One thing I forgot to mention is that rearward visibility is a bit compromised. Rear 3/4 is okay for a car of this size, especially with that extra quarter window on the C-pillar, but again, this is some of the compromises of having a svelte design, is that the greenhouse is a bit smaller. Also, this B-pillar is quite big. Okay, sharp left-hander coming. Any body roll? None at all. One last thing to check. See what this car is like on the open road. One thing I've just found out whilst driving is, right now it's in drive, but if I were to pull back on the gear selector, that gives me sport mode, which holds the gears for longer. Whereas if I were to push it to the side, that strictly puts me into manual mode. Unlike in a Jaguar, where pushing it to the side will put it into sport mode, and then once you shift up or shift down yourself, that's when it goes into manual mode. Just something I found out right now. Another thing I just found out, if I press the button on the indicator stalk, I'm guessing that's lane keeping assist, but when I tried to get close to the lane, I did not get any warning at all. So let's turn that off, and in the meantime, press the car button, which pops the screen, so your view is compromised for the time being, and put it into dynamic, and close the screen. Now you can see me again, and already the car is eager to rev beyond 2000 RPM, and the car is automatically in sport mode, so there's no two-stage process to put it into maximum attack. And pickup is dramatically improved. Even with a slight blip of the accelerator, I get pushed into the seat, like so. Okay, on the dual carriageway now, everything on full blast, and 3, 2, 1, and that's more like it. Now this is the advantage of having a twin clutch system. You get that instant response when kicking down, and the reason being is that because you've got two clutches basically, one clutch is your current gear, the second clutch is basically the next gear up. So on the roundabout now, due to Audis having their engines in front of the front wheels, they are prone to having understeer, and unfortunately that's exactly what I experienced right there on that roundabout. Quickly put it into normal mode, get up to speed. So at 70, this diesel A7 revs to about 1600 RPM, thereabouts. So it is very quiet on long motorway journeys, and that's one of the benefits of having a diesel in a car like this. They were made to do lots of long motorway journeys. And here in Gloucester, you got the M5 literally just here. So let's put it back into dynamic mode and do a U-turn and see what this car is like in manual mode. Okay, and on the roundabout now, so move the lever to the left, and I'll start off with the paddles, which on the downshifts are very lightning quick. What I don't like is how cheap and plasticky these paddles feel. So metal ones would have been preferable, but at least they are fixed to the wheel and not to the column, so they are still basically behind the prongs when I turn the wheel. Back onto the slip road. 3, 2, 1, and... Despite being a diesel, this car definitely feels and sounds like a petrol. Again, this car does have an aftermarket system and it does have a stage 1 map, but the Quattro, you can tell, instantly kicks in like so, as it is a permanent all-wheel drive system, as opposed to the Haldex you get in smaller Audis. Due to this car only revving to just under 5,000 revs, I can't really play with the gears as much. And like I said, I mentioned that the plus and the minus were the wrong way round on the selector, and the reason that they're the wrong way round is when you pull back to shift down, you're basically going the opposite way of your body movement. So when you're putting your foot down like so, you're pushed into your seat, so you want to shift up by pulling back, and when you're braking, you're being pushed forward. So for that, you want the minus to be forwards. Yeah, so basically the gear selector is going the opposite direction to your body movement, but other than that, the paddles are perfectly fine despite the plasticky texture. If only this road was quieter, I would have experienced this car way more dynamically. Again, definitely a twin clutch system. You can tell by the transition of it going from slow to quick instantly. One more stretch. So let's head back to the car park and finalize this video. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching me try out this Audi A7 Sportback. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you are new, ring the bell to stay up to speed, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.